Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you happen to be watching this. I hope A, that I'll see you in the next class, and B, I hope the day's going well for you. Today, I want to talk about writing the thesis. I want to talk about a few tips that I have borrowed, for lack of a better phrase, from various sources. And I think that this is an important part of the next two essays, both the comparison and contrast essay and the cause and effect essay, because the thesis is going to be the key to developing your ideas and to communicating those ideas with your readers. Number one, everything's an argument. You have heard me say that. You have heard me refer to the textbook entitled Everything's an Argument. This, I'll give you the citation for it at the end, but this comes from a different source where every essay is an argument, even if its only point is I'm worth reading. In other words, make sure that you're stating a proposition and that that proposition is not something so simple that it can be yes or no. The photo on the slide here comes from one of the great comedy sketches of all time, the Monty Python Argument Clinic. You can Google it or you can, YouTube search it. It's certainly worth a watch. But the fact of the matter is, everything's an argument, and an argument is a proposition supported by facts. And so when you take a look at what your essay is, the thesis is basically that proposition, and the essay is all of the supportive material for that proposition. Number one, be confident. You're not a 6-year old begging for candy. And at the same time, perhaps I will be philosophical and practice philosophy without a license. Remember, there's a difference between lack of confidence and overconfidence, and both are equal vices. But the fact of the matter is, words like may or possibly or might shouldn't be part of the thesis. The thesis should establish a proposition, whether it's these things, these similarities, or these differences lead us to believe X or Y or Z, or in the upcoming comparison and contrast essay, whether it's thinking about the idea that, or the upcoming, a cause and effect essay, that X causes Y, therefore we should not do X. Whatever it is, be confident, perhaps avoid the stupidity or the truly ridiculous, but be confident. Single minded. I think the idea of single minded, the idea of focused, what makes this essay worth reading? Everything about the thesis should illustrate to your reader that this essay is worth reading, that this essay will get you from point A to point B. What makes it worth reading? Dynamic. You want to push the reader to the next paragraph, the next page, and all subsequent pages. And again, I stole this from a source that I'll give you at the end, but I do think that it's important to remember that for you as a writer, it should push you to the next paragraph, the next page, and all subsequent pages. The thesis is a twofold thing, and I'll talk about this later, but it pushes the reader and it guides you as the writer. So how does it, to use the word cloud over here, how does it allow you to grow the essay? How does it allow you to make progress with the essay? How does it allow you to develop the essay? All of those words on the far right hand side. Make sure that it is dynamic, that it pushes the reader in some manner, in some fashion, towards the next paragraph, and it guides you as a writer to that next page and all subsequent pages. Flawless. Flawless, I think, is a dangerous word because we expect things to be perfect. Flawless also, I think, is a dangerous word because English teachers, and I'm guilty of this as well, have talked about flawless in the idea of grammar, in the idea of punctuation, in the idea of spelling, in the idea of avoiding those sorts of errors. Here, I think flawless is in the idea of the roadmap. Is it flawless in being the best way to get you from point A to point B to point C? Does it have the proper action verb? Does it have the proper descriptive model to move you through the essay as a roadmap and to motivate the readers to keep going? Those are the types of things where it needs to be flawless. If you have errors in the verbs, if you have errors in the goal, in the organization of the thesis, you're not going to achieve your goal, and your readers are not going to want to continue reading. Economical. I've used this screenshot a couple of times. No extra words. I talked in several class periods about the most important things in your essay, the things that you as a writer want your readers to remember. Those things should be in short, compact, simple sentences with strong action verbs. They should be economical. They should be concise. It's the same with the thesis. The thesis is your most important part of your document. And because it's the most important part of your document, the thesis should be economical. The thesis should have concrete nouns. The thesis should have action verbs that provide the full context that the reader is going to need to want to continue reading. Don't let other things get in the way. Absolutely, positively, don't let other things get in the way. Like I just did there with terms like absolutely and positively. What follows are a few helpful hints. And again, notice I say I hope, but I believe that some of these should provide a little bit of guidance as you compose the thesis for those next two essays. Number one, focus on the ideas and the topic, not the writer. In the thesis, beginning with in this paper I will discuss, those words should never appear in your paper. They are fine as planning words. They are fine as you're sitting down and thinking about what is it that I want to say. I've talked before about doing after reading my essay, the reader should, or after reading this essay, Collis should, and then know or believe or whatever verb you want. But I've also said that those phrases shouldn't be in the paper either. Focus on the ideas, focus on the topic. This isn't about you, so the I will discuss never needs to be there. Stay single minded. What's in it for the reader? And I believe you need to answer this question with an action verb. And remember, as the superheroes will tell you, verb is what you do. All right? A verb is what you do. And again, I think of the thesis like a promissory note. This is what I'm promising to deliver to my readers, but the promise has to be an action. You are not paying them money. The promise needs to be an action of some sort. So, what's in it for the reader? What should the reader get? To repeat myself from the previous slide, after reading my essay, the reader should finish that sentence. But again, that's part of the planning. That is not a phrase that should appear in your thesis. What's in it for you as a writer? I've said several times that this should not be about the writer. This should be about the ideas. This should be about the topic, what we're talking about. But that said, everything's an argument. There is a point you want to make. And for the comparison and contrast essay that I'm going to be talking about in class, the comparisons and contrasts are always means to an end. What's the end of the comparison and contrast? And for the thesis, it's how to get from the thing you're comparing and contrasting, things you're comparing and contrasting, to that conclusion. So, how do I get there? The thesis is the roadmap to get you there. So, not only are you thinking about it in terms of a promissory note for the writer, you're thinking about it as a roadmap for you to deliver that promissory note. There are a couple of things. There's no law saying that the thesis should be at the end of the first paragraph. It was not the 11th commandment. It was not something Moses dropped on his way down from Mount Sinai. But because people expect it there, follow convention. Put it near the end of the first paragraph. Also, if it's not there at the end of the first paragraph, the reader is going to wonder what's the point, because they're probably going to have trouble trying to read the next few paragraphs, trying to figure out where the thesis is. And then, second, and perhaps more importantly, I believe that you as a writer need that roadmap established for you at the end of the first paragraph. I will throw in a tip that I have made several times. If you're stuck, write out a draft. Look at your last paragraph of that draft, and I'm willing to bet you will find the topics you want to discuss, the argument you want to make, and you'll be able to construct a thesis out of that last paragraph. Use that last paragraph as the intro paragraph to your final draft and follow the order of the thesis, the order of the ideas in that paragraph, and it might work for you. But please, get the thesis in there early, follow the conventions, be conventional, at least in that one aspect. One of the tips that I stole is narrow the target audience. Write for one ideal reader. Who is this ideal reader? Figure out who the ideal reader is and write for one. Think about it as a conversation with one ideal reader. Think about this is the point one ideal reader should walk away with. And as you think about ideal readers, what do they know or what should they know? And what will they likely need to know? Your thesis should focus on providing what they will likely need to know. Think about an ideal reader, create an imaginary ideal reader. If you had an imaginary friend as a child, bring that imaginary friend back, turn him or her or it into your imaginary reader. Talk about the main point. Talk to someone else. Try to talk through the main point. Talk to yourself. I realize that those of you who live in the dorm probably are a bit worried about talking to yourself. People might start wondering what's wrong with you. But as the photo on the slide says, or the meme on the slide says, when you're talking to yourself, at least you know someone's listening. Talk to yourself, talk through the main point, talk it out, think out loud. All right? Those two things, talk, who's the ideal reader, talk to yourself, talk out the main point, I think are ways to get ideas to gel and then write it down. Don't trust your memory. We're all too easily distracted by shiny objects. Don't, don't be someone who thinks I'll remember it. I know I'll remember it. Likely, we all will forget it. Write it down. Write it in a little pocket notebook. Write it on your phone. Write it on a note in your computer and save it to Drive. Whatever it is you need to do, write it down. You've talked it through. You've pictured this ideal audience. You've spoken with your imaginary friend. Once you've got that thesis, write it down. Once you've got that key point, that focus, write it down. I've stolen the web images from the web for educational purposes. The vast majority of these things were from How to Write Like a Writer, a sharp and subversive guide to ignoring inhibitions, inviting inspiration, and finding your true voice. And several things, the write it down part in particular, came from Smart Brevity, the power of saying more with less. Again, I hope you're all having a good day. I hope that all of you will be in class. And if you have questions, please let me know. I'll do my best to answer them. Have a good one.